After all the Resident Evil and Spider-Man games I played recently, I wanted to check out a shooter. Something short and sweet with good action. I chose something which for sure would be short. A little shooter called Industria. A game created by a very small team, mostly consisting out of 2 people, creating a rather ambitious game. But let's not talk about the circumstances, but the game itself. Industria starts on the day when the wall in Berlin fell. But instead of unification, we see a young woman being woken up by her phone. Something awful happened to her boyfriend, and we quickly run over to the research facility where he works. The Stasi is already on the way. In front of the facility we see some anomalies occurring around the building. We enter it and find it completely empty. Eventually we find a machine which seems to have taken the boyfriend, Walter, to some other place. Lacking any other better option, we just follow him. When we wake up, we find ourselves in another world. A world in ruins. Some otherworldly gadgets are infesting the surrounding. We soon also encounter some robots which immediately attack us. At this point we only have a pickaxe, and unfortunately the melee combat ain't that great in this game. It doesn't take too long though until we have all the weapons in the game and can fight properly. We also meet a man called Brand, who will soon navigate us through the city and lead us to the train station. The way to the train station is plastered with enemies, which are pretty threatening at first, until you get the MP, and then later on the shotgun. From that point on, it gets ridiculously easy. I have to say I did start on hardcore mode first, but then changed to normal, when I was killed by an enemy with an MP who just kept shooting me no matter where in the level I was. And for some reason he seemed invincible to my pistol. That unfortunately also broke a couple of things in the game, until I finished it in my second play session. For example, I was unable to collect notes. It might be that my ammo capacity was lower and there were a couple of other minor things. But overall it worked and there were no major issues. I also didn't die a single time after turning it on normal. Overall this was a very easy game actually. And I kind of regretted that I turned it to normal. The only point when I almost died later on was in the train station or train factory where enemies seemed to spawn non-stop. But at some point I realized where I had to go. So I ran to that position almost without any ammo left, found some more on that position and just shot my way to the elevator to finally escape. You often fight only a couple of robots at a time. While the enemies are dealing a lot of damage when they are up close, they usually don't get that far. A couple of shots are enough to take care of them. There are also only a few enemy types. Most of the time you fight a slow robot type with blade hands. Then they introduce a small running enemy which explodes when it's close by. Then there's also a fast blade wielding android type enemy, an MP wielding enemy, the only one which shoots you and often hits you but deals only very little damage. And lastly a dog enemy. I don't even know what that one is supposed to do. It never came close enough to attack me. While the enemies are usually placed so they can ambush you early on in the game, they later just stand around and sometimes don't even know how to get to you. So yeah, it doesn't have the greatest AI and the enemies are too few to be a threat once you have several guns. In my opinion the enemies are also quite generic. While the standard enemy type is looking quite cool when in the dark, as the lamp on their head illuminates the environment just a little bit, they all just look not that interesting. The weapons are also kind of generic, but fortunately they feel and sound quite good. There's the pickaxe, which is kind of useless in actual battle, but helps breaking boards and supply crates. The pistol, which is okay but rather weak. And once you get the MP, which looks like a mix of the Metro 2033 MP and the Stan, you probably won't get back to it often. There's also a super powerful sniper rifle and a shotgun which is also very strong. For the weapons you only get 1 or 2 spare magazines until you reach the ammo capacity maximum. But usually you still walk around well equipped as ammo is plenty. When you get hurt you can just drink a health vial and you are good to go again. there's no regenerative health. So the level design and gameplay are a bit of a mixed bag, but can the story win me over? Well, I mean, at least the ideas were interesting. The game feels an awful lot like Half-Life, and also like Bioshock later on. The sci-fi and the time and space travel, the alternate world with revelations that reminded me a lot of Bioshock Infinite, you can really see the inspirations of this game. But unfortunately it doesn't achieve the greatness of its inspirations. It is ambitious for sure, and it's honestly impressive that the team achieved this level of quality, despite being so small and probably not that experienced. This here is definitely not some kind of trash that barely works and is horribly designed. No. It is made with the Unreal Engine. It looks pretty good, there are some impressive landscapes. The buildings and environments look pretty good as well, the robots are also well modeled. There are barely any human models visible, but the few models which are present look fine. The weapons are also very detailed and look like actual weapons. The sound is also great, but it often becomes clear that this is not a complete big game, but rather a smaller part of something bigger. It doesn't even feel like a part 1, but more like an episode 1 or a prologue of a bigger story, and very little is resolved here. There are many ideas which are thrown at the wall, but they are just ideas, while Bioshock is telling rather clever stories. In utopias which turn into dystopias, this here is just a number of events happening. It starts in East Germany on the day the wall was torn down, but except for a few cars and mentioning the Stasi, almost nothing is done with this premise. Then we meet Brent in the other world and just talk a little bit with him. We learn only very little about him. Also the twist which is revealed at some point in the game is just there, and then we have this Matrix Reloaded-esque ending. The environments, while good looking, are also not that interesting. There are only a couple of banners, actually only 2, which you will see over and over again. There are some barricades, some robot orbs, and that's basically it. I mean, with the barricades they tried to give us some festive atmosphere, like we had in the Bioshock games, when we see that celebrations are happening or have happened, but here it has almost no effect because we see as good as nothing, except for the banners. You can sometimes see a giant robot walking around in the distance, but there's also no context for it. We don't know what he is doing. What is his purpose? Is he a threat to us? We simply don't know. There's also no boss fight or anything like it. The ending is just a bunch of cutscenes and walking around, so it doesn't go out with a bang, but with a whimper. It's a pity, this had some promise. While nothing great, a lot of it is solid, and while it's impressive what the small team created, it just didn't win me over in regards to the gameplay or storytelling in the end. It feels like lesser versions of its inspirations, and while it looks great, you can sometimes feel it was a small team. There are also some sections called the library, which just feel like filler. There are also some very simple puzzles, which can be solved rather quickly, and stuff which can be picked up and carried just like in Half-Life. After about 3 hours the game is already over, and that's it. While I'm curious what the team will do next, Industria just didn't do anything for me. Everything which was interesting story-wise was quickly abandoned. The things which were explored a bit more have been done better in other games. While using guns is fun, there's just not enough excitement in the fights with these kinds of enemies and that AI. It's okay, but there are better games of this kind, and fighting robots made me think of Hard Reset, which was just more fun. And Industria gets a 5 out of 10. And I recommend it only if it has a very low price on sale, if at all.